This is David Crosby. I'm at Wells Church on the 9th of April, 2015. I'm with Bruce Reynolds, and we're recording an interview as part of the Wells Oral History Project. And Bruce, do we have your permission to record this interview?
Yes, you do.
Thank you very much. Well, I see by your little biographical sheet that you have spent your entire professional career in planning and development. First with the as an intern when you got out of college, and then moving through the ranks.
Right. Spent 35 years at Central Mississippi Planning and Development District and retired about 3 years ago.
Wow. So you've lived your whole life in Jackson?
Born and raised in Clinton, Mississippi, and but for my time at Oxford at the university, back in Clinton, and they try as they may, they haven't run us off yet. So.
With respect to your connection to Wells Church, could you tell me when that began?
Wow. I have to really go back. We used to catch Keith Tonkel on radio in the evening when I was driving, and enjoyed his messages, and that was probably back in the late 70s. And we followed his voice to Wells Church, and at the time he was splitting the pulpit between Jackson and also in Clinton. And so back in the late 70s we visited the Clinton church, and also on Bailey Avenue where he is now at Wells. And probably about, my daughter was born in 1982, so probably about 1980 or 81, we became members here at Wells and have been going here ever since.
So his radio program was your first encounter with Keith?
It was, and it was just one of those bright spots on the radio dial, as it were. Just this youthful pastor coming over the airwaves, and he just really resonated not just with me but my wife also, and enough to the point where we found out where he was and followed him here.
Could you specify a little bit what aspects of his message you found most interesting and compelling?
Certainly. Upbeat, first of all, non-condemning, welcoming, and his just, it's hard to put into words, but his zest for life, and living the good life, and how it can return to you and to others, via blessings. And again, just a fresh voice.
I see. Had you been a member of a church somewhere else
I
before?
had, yeah, and Wells is a very, very, very interesting and unique place. It normally kind of used to be a stopping off point, or maybe even a reuniting place for people who had had bad experiences with religion in their church in the past. You have to remember, this was, like I say, in the late 70s, early 80s, and a lot of condemnation had been preached, and a lot of folks had left the church as a result of it. And back in the day, this was a place where we heard you could come in blue jeans, and at the time that was unheard of, and I came in my finest three-piece suit, and guess what? There were people here in blue jeans, but there were other people in suits also. And so a lot of people found this a safe harbor that they did not realize existed. And it's funny, we talk about how a lot of people snuck into the balcony after service started and then snuck away from the balcony so they wouldn't have to say anything to the preacher. And after a couple of weeks, they would sit up there the whole time, and then they would say something to the preacher. And a month or two later, they're in the back row of the church. And 3 or 4 years later, they're getting married here, sitting on the front row. And because it is an inner city church, a lot of our couples, when they had children, might move their church letter to the suburbs so that their children could have maybe a more welcoming place to grow up, because we are on the main streets here. And but we had a lot of couples who did stay, and we raised our children. We collectively raised our children here, and it's kind of interesting in that they've taken a lot of Wells with them to other places.
How many children do you have?
Moni Reynolds is all 5 of our children. We were, like everybody else, can have 3 or 4 children. We had Moni, my little girl, and we decided that she was handful enough to be all of them for us. And she came up through Wells and was shaped and molded by the church and the congregation. And we had our rough times like everyone else. High school was not the most fun. College was a challenge, and but she graduated in 4 years and married and is faithful to a church where she is, and we are watching her grow, not just professionally but spiritually also. And so much of the roots grow deep here at Wells.
So you don't have any regrets about raising her in contact with the Wells community?
Oh, absolutely not. At the time, and we struggled over it too, because we have no bowling alley, we have no basketball courts, and none of her friends from Clinton, we travel 18 miles one way to get here, were going here at the time. But she made friends from all over the metro area here, and certainly we might have missed out on, and she might have missed out on some other type of social activities. But again, what she got here, has been special, and so no regrets.
Okay. You suggested one of the differences that you perceived in Keith's approach to religion was a zest for living, a kind of upbeat approach, and you were more likely to encounter things like condemnation in some of the other churches. And was that specifically with respect to social, religious, sexual behaviors, the Ten Commandments kind of thing, or was there some other dimension that I haven't?
No. Yes, and yes to those that you mentioned. I think that where a lot of us were brought up, it was "thou shalt not" rather than "thou shalt," and the negative being emphasized rather than the positive. And religion can be a hard thing, or it can be a good thing. And here at Wells, it is a good thing. It can be condemning, or it can be freeing. And we have chosen with Keith's leadership and others, to be more welcoming and more freeing, and to and it's all there in the Bible too. It's the good stuff is there, and that emphasis on that has, I think, really sown the seed and grown us at this church here.
A lot of people would, kind of divide things into conservative and liberal. Do you suppose those labels apply in this situation?
I tell you what, this is a weird church because when I started here, like I say, back in the day, the hippies went here, and but that's not all. We have just the opposite, of the spectrum with deeply conservative folks also. And we range from conservative to liberal, from white to black, and that's the beauty of this is it's not about being conservative, it's not about being liberal, it's not about being middle of the road, it's about Jesus, and it's about Christ, and we can all relate to that. You don't have to be one or the other, and that's to me the beauty of this place.
One of the things that Keith is remembered for in his own lifetime is signing the I can't remember what it was called, something of conviction, I think.
Sure, I think it was a letter of conviction, maybe even sure. Which it was a response basically to some churches that were trying to keep black folks from entering their churches on just to worship on Sunday. That was probably before you became acquainted with Keith, wasn't it? It was, but we were. I was certainly aware of the movement and knew of that. I was in high school at the time when all of that was going on. Absolutely.
And were you were aware of that then, when you?
Well, you're aware in Mississippi, particularly in that day, when you went to a church and you had a minority, congregant, because it was either white or black, and quite honestly, as it is mostly today too. We have changed a lot, but a lot of it hasn't changed in kind of the whole spectrum if you look at it. And but the beauty of this place is when I walk in and everybody else, you don't say, "Oh, we have some minority members," or "We have some white members," or whatever. It's the Christ-likeness of being above that. That's not an issue. But back in the day, certainly it was much more of an issue. But people gravitated here because let me take that back. I gravitated here not because of that, not because of the activism, but because of the welcomeness, the openness, and that not that they would accept minorities, but they'd accept me here. You know what I mean? And us, and I'm throwing myself with everybody else here. Black, white, whatever. That's the beauty of it.
Did friends or acquaintances ever question you about your affiliation with Wells in a negative kind of way? Or?
It's been interesting. No, to answer your question. People knew that it was different. They knew that I was going to a church that was different, and a lot of it was because of the social activism. But what's interesting is over the long haul how they might have raised an eyebrow, but again, no, I was never questioned or whatever. Like I said, an eyebrow might have been raised. Now it is, oh, well, yeah, that's the little church, on Bailey in the inner city. And it's kind of like, good for y'all, you're trying to do a good thing. And so, what did we used to say? Things have mellowed.
So you never felt your career as a public servant was threatened by...
Actually, it was enhanced. And I will tell you, it has been on two levels. One is everything professionally that I have done was proceeded here at Wells. It's been very interesting. Used to be total introvert, was never a member of a committee, and became a member of a committee, and watched and saw how things were handled, then became a chairman of a committee and then of another one, and soon thereafter professionally would be the same thing, and as I grew professionally, it was initially here at Wells that I learned how to do that. But trying to get back to your original question, the other way it helped me professionally is I dealt with politics an awful lot. I dealt with 7 counties and 33 municipalities and all the local elected officials in there. And where it actually helped me was when Benny Thompson, Bruce, you go to Wells? I had an entrance into his door then. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't looking for it, I wasn't expecting it, but with the minority elected officials, they knew. And it surprised me because it was like, I'm not doing anything different, am I? I'm just going to church. But it was kind of instant credibility with particularly our minority elected officials. It helped out an awful lot, and I'm still friends with them today. But it never was, that I know of, I don't think it was, a detriment to the other local elected officials either.
So you think it gave you an ability to
Absolutely.
bridge different constituencies, and planning is all about getting people to agree to things, I would guess.
Yeah, it did, and in working with local elected officials, you have to have their trust. And, no matter what you do, be it planning, economic development, helping them write a grant or whatever, and it's just kind of this instant instant credibility, no question.
Well, what kinds of activities did you first get involved with? I mean, you came because of the message.
Yes.
And you stayed because of the sense of welcome, and then you began to get involved in other things.
Yeah, it started off with the administrative board, which is, I didn't know anything about the Methodist Church. I was raised Presbyterian, married a Baptist, and so here we are going to a Methodist church. But when we're in Oxford visiting our daughter, we go to the First Presbyterian Church up there, so, we're all over the road. But the Methodist Church has the administrative board, and it's in most churches it's not that large of a committee, but at Wells it is a very large committee, and that this kind of decides where money will be spent. We have a council which decides, what we'll be doing, and they asked me to be on the board, and or the administrative board, and I was aghast. I didn't know what to do, and thought it would be cool to do it. And then you saw the inner workings, and the missions that we have here. And the more that I learned, the more that I started tapping into, and that just kind of evolved into just a lot of mission work that we've done.
So you became associated with the administrative side, the administrative board, rather than the council of ministries. But one of them led you back to the other, in a sense.
Yeah, and the council would bring to the board ideas, and we would not really ratify, but I guess in effect we're so doing. We had to come up with the money to pay for it, and so say, yes, this is a good idea. But I've always been kind of on the administrative and kind of doing side than the great free thinkers side of it there.
How do you pay for things at Wells?
Oh, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Keith preaches sermon after sermon about tithing and giving and pledging, and I am totally lying to you here. One of Keith's thing is he has never preached a sermon on giving, and it is a miraculous thing. And I learned this early through my board work. We had a gentleman who would say, if it's God's will, it'll get paid for, and it would. We don't have pledge cards here. We don't sign up that we're going to give X number of dollars. We are not a rich church. We really are not. We are a rather modest, if not meager, in income around here across the board. But when we had our huge building campaign, because this is an old church back in the 80s, we knew it was going to cost a lot of money, and it cost a lot more than that. But every penny of it was taken care of. And I have found out that if there is something that is needed and it's in God's will, it will be paid for. I'm not sure how, and it's a miraculous thing, but it's one of those cool miracles, let God, and He will. And if we have something that, we do a budget and we abide by that budget, we might be a little over, a little under, but at the end of the year, we do that. But if something comes up, I'm sitting here looking at the pulpit, all one has to do is stand up there and say, I have been led, or not even that, I feel that there's a need for fill in the blank, and some bodies will hear, and God will nudge, a check will be written, and whatever it is will be taken care of. And it has always been like that, and as long as we, continue in God's will, it will continue to.
So kind of spontaneous philanthropy?
Absolutely. And again, this from a church that doesn't have a whole lot of money too, but it will get it done. And the other thing that we are blessed, a friend of mine and many have told me, you can't outgive God. The church can't outgive God either. We are very strict about when we do our budget, that we spend as little as possible on the administrative end of it there. And God bless the folks who work here, but our goal is, the money that is brought in through tithes and offerings is as much as possible for mission work, be it, Bailey Avenue or, Tlamak, Mexico, or Managua, Nicaragua. It is just amazing to see how this little church can affect as many folks as it can, financially, by trying to do the right thing.
Is there any particular ministry that you have felt drawn to?
Absolutely. Back in the day, again, this was in the early 80s, Malcolm White talked about, it's an interesting story. Malcolm was getting married. Keith married him. Malcolm goes to Keith and said, how much do I owe you for doing our wedding? And Keith says, I do not accept compensations for, weddings. And Malcolm said, no, I'm going to pay you for it. And they went back and forth. Keith wasn't going to accept it. So Malcolm comes back and says, okay, this is going to be my payment to you. It's going to be a gift. We'll do a celebration, a festival, and it'll be for neighborhood folks, and that's going to be my gift to you since you won't accept it. And that was the initiation, the synthesis of Wells Fest. And we got a goofy little committee together and started very, very, very humbly. And what we decided it would be Wells Methodist Church present to the community, and free admission, free rides and all this stuff. And it is great. The first one we did, we all had fun, and it actually kind of came off. And somebody brought me a bag of money, and it was, I think, about $900, maybe $1,000. Like, what's this? They said, well, we made some money, off of drinks, and this was. And it was like, dude, what do we do with this, And so I had $1,000 and took it home and literally put it in my freezer that night because I didn't know what to do with it. And then the next Sunday morning gave it to the treasurer, minus about $250 for carrying fees. Not really, we gave it all to him there. And we realized that, it was a fundraiser. And so the first part, and I will admit this, did go to the renovation of the church. But that's because we didn't know what to do with it. And since then, I guess the 31 years since, however, we have decided that it will go to a certain recipient. We actually do requests for proposals and we select a recipient. And now they're getting about, we raise about $60,000, and every bit of that money goes from Wells to whomever that recipient is. We keep none of it. And that's kind of our tithe to the community. And as a result of that, God keeps blessing us, you know. And so that was my initial one, mission, if you will. Kind of stumbled into that, didn't know what was going on. And since then, Galloway Elementary School, which is across the street, we have adopted them, and that has become one of my missions. And I say my missions, it's one of the church's missions that I have bought into. We do a book buddy program where we put an adult with a child, and they help them to learn to read for about an hour a week. And we help them with science projects, and we have achievement awards programs where we feed all of the parents and bring the kids in and give them awards and accolades and clap for them for not just being the best, but we also have the most improved award, because so many of the kids have improved drastically but will never be that A student, you know. And so we try to recognize them. And Galloway has been a big mission of this church, and we're trying desperately to, you know, to help these kids out, because it's tough. It is, you know. I thought I knew what tough was, you know, but I have learned how little these kids have, what little resources they bring to bear, and how.
And Galloway is the local public
I'm
school.
sorry, it is the elementary school, pre-K through 5th grade, and it's immediately across the street from us, and has been there forever. And we help the school with teacher appreciation, give them little gift cards and this sort of thing, and just trying to help out where we can there. Yeah.
So just as if a business were adopting a school, the church adopts a school.
Right, and they have a couple of other adopters also, the Medical Mall, and I know there are a couple more, I just can't name them right now, but we consider each other partners. We really do, and just try to help them wherever we can.
And you mentioned someplace in Mexico and
Guatemala. Tillamook, Mexico. We started, I have no idea, I would say 20 years ago, on helping out with a medical mission. And it's in central Mexico, about 3 hours outside of Mexico City in the mountains. And when we started the mission, the little medical mission was nothing. And we were not the only team. There were teams from North Carolina and other places around the United States. And we would go down there every year. And every year there would be something, you know, another room, and we would help, you know, with the construction, and until it was completed, a little 2-story, and medical and dental. And then we helped work on the parsonage for the Methodist preacher down there. And it got to the point where we felt it, and were advised not to go because it was unsafe. And so we have not been able to go down there in a number of years, but we have been making inquiries and are trying to sneak back down there and do that. And since then, we've been going. We've done, I think, 3 trips to Nicaragua, about, again, 3 hours outside of Managua, helping with medical clinics down there, dispensing medical care, dispensing medications, and helping out like that. And also, we're doing. Rather than sending folks, we have established a contact in Haiti, and are assisting them with some local like economic development type things to try to bolster the locals' economy there and to help them out. But we're right at the point of looking at doing some boots on the ground mission trips because we love the relationships that we get with these folks when we get down there. It's not a cheap thing. Some feel like money is better spent otherwise, but the love we have for those folks in Tillamook, we miss, and we want to get back and see them. We want to establish this type of relationship somewhere else. So we're kind of working on that right now and hoping within a year to be able to do a foreign mission trip again.
I'd like to clarify something about, you say a medical mission, there's a clinic. Is this something that's staffed regularly?
Right.
And you go down there to try to improve it, things like that. But do you have a concern for the year-round staffing of the place?
Very good question. When we started, there wasn't even a clinic, and so what we were first trying to do is, while some folks were doing brick and mortar, we had doctors and dentists with us, and in the rudimentary building we were in, hundreds of clients would come in and be treated for either medical or dental, and then medicines given to them. As the building came up, we got a very part-time doctor who would come there every once in a while, and as it got a little bit better, a dentist would come in like once a week. And now my understanding, and it's been a number of years, but it was fully staffed by a doctor, and a dentist would come in from time to time. So it evolved from nothing to a pretty nice little thing there.
And when they told you it was unsafe to continue, what were the concerns about?
The main concern, because of the drug cartels and the kidnapping and ransoming, and that's the main thing.
I see.
And it started with State Department too. They literally said, we consider this unsafe, and so.
And if you get kidnapped, we're not going to help you.
Well, and the thing is, what they don't realize, if we get kidnapped, they're not going to get very much for us anyway. So.
Yeah, clearly not a good situation.
Yeah.
I was talking to Keith Ferguson yesterday, and he would probably second everything you said about the getting to know the people and his particular relationship there. Yeah. So it sounds like it's meant a lot to the church here.
It has, and when I first started going down there, I'm not a doctor or a dentist, not a construction foreman either, and I felt like, kind of, what am I doing down here? I don't mind spending the money, but it's kind of like a vacation, in a primitive format. But when you come back, you do realize that the relations that you forge down there, and the next year you go down and Jail or any number of folks, and they know you, and you miss them, and it is a relational thing, and it's something that we miss, and we do want to start again.
A large part, I'm guessing a large part of the congregation here doesn't actually live in this neighborhood. No.
Uh-huh.
But some do.
Uh-huh.
And the relationships among the drive-ins and the walk-ins, I'd be curious about how that works out.
An interesting situation too. Back in the day, I keep using that word, but back in the day, this was, the center of Jackson. This was one of the neat places to live. Wells was strictly a white church at the time. When it had its decline. When Keith came here, depending on who you're talking to, there were only 13 congregants or 50, depends on who you're talking to. But it was the old dry bones sort of thing, and he, breathed some breath back into it. And the church, the area and the church was in a transitional stage. White flight taking place, and minorities moving in, and Keith's presence was the anchor then. And I don't care what he says about it. He was the anchor, and yes, he was known for signing the letter and for other things. My feeling is the Holy Spirit brought him here, and thus brought some other folks. And early on, it was still mainly a white church, even with back in the day when he was a champion of civil rights. We still didn't have a lot of minority members then, and quite honestly, only recently have some of the neighborhood folks started coming in. And it's an interesting thing in that we know that a number of our local folks get in trouble with their congregants from where they came from, across the street or their church, because they feel like, well, you need to be going to an all black church, and that works both ways, and it's difficult for them to leave their roots and come here too. But one of our other missions on every Tuesday morning, and others have probably mentioned this, we have what we used to call our food pantries. Now we call our neighborhood ministries, and we give out a modicum of food and bread, but we have generally 100 people from the neighborhood who come in to get food, and Keith gives a little mini sermon beforehand. We sing a song, and that has brought more folks here than anything else from the local communities. And I'm starting to see some of my good friends on Tuesday morning coming in for some bread, who are now sitting up there in the balcony and then moving to the back of the church, just as we have, and that has, we have a number of middle-class minority folks, but now we're starting to get some of our neighborhood folks in here, and it's a good thing. It really is.
Yeah, it's not as if the African Americans who live in this community are unchurched. There's obviously the African Methodist Episcopal Church has been a hugely successful congregation for African Americans ever since the 1790s.
Absolutely.
So that has the church ever thought about, say, partnering with an AME church in the area and doing some things together? If
so, I'm not aware of it. Keith is very familiar with the pastors in this area. Mm-hmm. They're very covetous of their flock. They are very covetous of their flock. I'm betting it wouldn't fly, and I might be totally wrong, but Keith is such a we speak of him as God, and he's not. We know that. He's not a cult leader either. He is a very, very special person, though, who is able to reach out and do. And he has made efforts, to bring in local population, and like I say, in God's time, it's happening. It really is. And this church would be, I don't know, probably twice the membership if we were not located here. I have good friends who say, I would love to go there, but my husband will not drive into that neighborhood. It's unsafe, and I'm not going, he won't let me do that. And what's so interesting is our neighbors take care of us here. We don't have problems. We might have had 2 incidences that I know of, like maybe a car broken into and a window broken. And one of them, our neighbors caught the guy, and I think had their foot on his neck, called the police, and they know who we are, we know who they are. We take care of each other. It's a symbiotic relationship. And another mission that we have is, the gardens around here, the landscaping, and that again is our gift to the community. And it's a beautiful little place to to wander around in, and we have, you know, the edible garden over here to where we try growing stuff, and it's there. You come and pick it, and you take it home and eat it or can it or whatever. And you know, this is kind of our extended congregation who might not be in church, but they are a part of this church.
That's my one contribution to Wells Church. I provide pine straw for Lloyd to
There you go.
mulch the vegetables.
Well, that's a huge thing, because Boy Moncrief, I mean, he spends his life doing this landscaping. Yeah.
Well, I got so much pine straw in my front yard, I'm grateful to have somebody get rid of it for me.
Yeah.
I had something I was going to ask, but it slipped my mind at the moment. Let's see. The question of safety. People being afraid to come down into this neighborhood. That has always struck me as so overblown. We were in a situation, I taught at Alcorn for 26 years, and we lived right off campus. So our girls took the school bus into Port Gibson and went to Port Gibson Public Schools, starting, our oldest was in the 3rd grade, and then all 3 of them graduated from Port Gibson High School. And the white people in Port Gibson, when they would hear that our kids were in the public schools, were just, aren't you afraid? And they were treated so well.
Yeah.
And I mean, they had, you know, a few rough spots to navigate, but you have that at any school.
True.
And but they now they're in their 40s, and I'm sure that they wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world.
Agreed.
But white folks tend to be really fearful.
Yeah, no question.
Well, I'm sure there are questions that I haven't asked that should have been. Can you? Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me first of all about this oral history project?
Yeah. How will it? What will the format of it be? How will it be distributed? Or
Well, because it's part of this larger oral history program through the University of Southern Mississippi, everything will be archived there at Southern, and the participants will all get an electronic copy of their interviews. There's a committee that
right.
James Martin and my daughter Sarah Campbell are part of, that I think they're planning a program for sometime this spring.
It's in good hands. Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure, you know, like a round table or something where people who have been interviewed are going to maybe show some clips from those that were done with some video too. But ultimately, I think it's to try to help the congregation explore its origins and how they relate to what's going on now and what they might be moving toward in the future. So,
Well, it's
like planning.
Exactly. Well, I tell you what is humbling is when they come and ask me to do this, because I'm supposed to be the institutional knowledge around here, and look, I say, gracious, I am getting old. You know, I always used to look up to everybody else for the history of it. Now I are it. You know, it makes me nervous.
Well, you know, that life happens.
It does, and it does beat the alternative.
Yeah. Are there issues that you think are facing Wells Church that it either is not addressing or needs to address more vigorously as it faces the future?
Absolutely, and no question, you know, Keith Tonkla is, what is his age now, 115, I think. Keith is turning 80, I believe. I think that's right. And certainly, is there life after Keith Tonkla at Wells? That's the question. To many folks, it's unspoken. One of the committees I'm on is PPR, whatever. It's the staffing committee, where we have to deal with personnel, the bad stuff. But we have been very, very active over the last 3 years. When Keith, came down with his third round of cancer and was not able to preach, and what do we do about this? What do we do about that? And through the grace of God, we have put on board, my goodness, a team second to none. We have the former head pastor at Calvary Church as our assistant pastor. We have a principal of Jackson Public School. None are better than her, who retired to take to be on our team here. We have the former editor of the Clarion Ledger, who is working here, and then our minister of music. Where did he? Not Joliet, but Juilliard. Yeah. They have called him Mr. Juilliard. Is just our minister of music. And then, by the way, we have a pastor who has been the longest running Methodist pastor in Mississippi, probably the United States, for the last 60 years almost. And this team was just brought on board, and they are doing new and exciting things. We're rethinking everything, and it's one of those, if it ain't broke, break it. We're, just because we've done something in the past doesn't mean that we'll continue to. Let's do new and exciting things, and I hope that, and probably Betty Quinn spoke to the revival that started in this church back in the I'm not sure, in the 20s or 30s, and in my brain I see a revival happening here. Maybe not the same type, but a resurgence, a resurrection, if you will. This time, here it is, April, and we're seeing resurrection with Easter, but we're seeing resurrection outside as the trees just burst open. And I honestly believe, that God will do even a new thing here at Wells. And the team that we have, and the energy that I'm feeling, kind of a synergy is starting to happen that I'm excited about. I'm hoping for great things. But this is God's thing. If He wants it to happen, it will. And if not, then that's okay too, because it's His will.
Well, it's quite unusual, actually, in a Methodist church to have a minister for so long in one place. Right?
Well, first of all, nobody wanted it. Back in the day, when Keith started here, when time came, nobody wanted Wells. Keith's remained here. He built it up, and it is a unique church, as I spoke of earlier. I think that the Methodist Church realizes that, and we have been blessed that they have left him here. It is totally abnormal for this to happen. It's a phenomenal thing for them to allow this to happen. But it's a very unique situation. But we're prepared now. We are prepared that when it's time for Keith to move on or whatever, we're in place. We're ready to go. But we want him here as long as he will stay. I guarantee you.
So is there a mechanism in place for replacing a minister?
Absolutely. And once again, I told you I was raised Presbyterian. I've learned a lot. But the way it happens is every year the bishop, who's the head, basically the political head, or the head of the Methodist Church, makes appointments. And this happens throughout Mississippi and the United States, wherever. And at whatever point, we get a new minister, it will be through them, but with consultation to us. And we are We know that. We've been in contact with them about it, and we know that they know that this is a different situation, a unique situation, and we know that God will work through them to send us just the right person, that that other Keith Tonkel who's out there.
Well, I've seen some university presidents replaced by the Board of Trustees, institutions of higher learning. That can be a pretty messy procedure.
Certainly it can. And, every year within the Methodist Church, this happens, and quite honestly, the bishop can do whatever he wishes, but the good thing is that he does it through consultation. So we know good will come from it.
Mm-hmm. How large an area does the bishop of who is
State
over
of Mississippi?
State of Mississippi.
That's correct.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
It is, and that's something a church will say. We want to keep our pastor, or we want another pastor. They actually ask him, or it's up to you if you want to send us. And it was kind of a three-pronged way, and we have always said, please let us have our pastor back next year, and they've been very gracious in doing that.
Well, it's interesting to hear that there is active consideration of how to institutionalize the good things about Wells.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, this has been enlightening, and I appreciate the time you put in on this, and your forthrightness in answering these questions.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being able to do this without notes. Man, that's great. I wish I could do that. You asked me a question. I was at the end of the question trying to remember what the question was, and you're sitting here doing it without notes, so you do it well, and I appreciate your help with us.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you again for the interview.
Thanks.